Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Kat. So I'm gonna tell a story that I've never really told before. Uh, if you're my sister, Terry, you don't want to listen to this story. It's about the funeral home, so you don't want to listen to it. Again, you know the story, so you don't want to listen to this story. It's a story about how people in the funeral home like to take advantage of people in their worst vulnerable moments, the moments of having to deal with your loved one's death, which is a very vulnerable moment in somebody's life, especially when it's somebody that's so close to you, like blood, like a sister or like a blood relative. It's something else. When somebody takes advantage of you in those moments, there's no other word that I can describe it as other than despicable. It's disgusting. It's vile. Anyways, in 2017, my niece unexpectedly passed away. This is her right here. We were tight, close, like closer than an aunt and a niece. We were like sisters. We were like best friends, confidants, cut from the same cloth. Just like an ally that understood me and I understood. I was only 15 when she was born, so I went from being like, we kind of grew up together. So I went from babysitting her to hanging out with her to her being my friend to us hanging out together and, partying together and being really close. And when she died, it was like, I can't even describe how unbearable of a loss that was. Like, I know that it's hard because I don't want to take that away from my sister. But at the same time, it was like having my twin removed from me. My sister would always call me by her name and always call her by my name. And eventually she was just like, that's my name now. That's who I am. I'm Kathy now and you're Crystal now. And that's just how it was. We were just like connected, the same. It's when you're tight like that with somebody, there's a language that works between you guys that nobody else understands. You can just be together and you have the same language. You can just look at one another and the other one knows what they're thinking about, or you can look at a person and the person knows, like, just like, did you see the eyebrows on that person? You don't even have to say anything and that person can just like read your mind. You're just so tight with each other. And that's how her and I were. So when she passed away, it shattered me. Like, it shattered me. I felt responsible in so many ways. And I won't get into that in this video because I know if I do, I definitely won't make it through to what I'm trying to get to, because I'll just break down and that'll be the end of it. And grief is such a unpredictable thing. It can just creep up at you when you least expect it, and then you're done. It came very unexpected. So at the time, you don't know who to call for. You don't know funeral directors. You don't know who would be the best funeral home. For me, it's not something that you research before. So when it happens, you just think like, you got to think of a medical team that can go and really, you can release the body to. So I think maybe without even thinking, the name just popped out of my sister's mouth to the police officer at the time, and she just said, Pilon's Funeral Home. And that was it. There was no other option. That was the funeral home that the body was being released to. And my sister was not in any condition to make funeral arrangements or anything like that. We had never had a death in our immediate family before, other than a month before that. We just lost a cousin, a first cousin, that was completely devastating all by itself. That in itself is a completely other story too, because to lose two people who are blood that close within one another is just very hard for any normal person to get through that. Oh, but then when Crystal died, it was just something completely different. The body was released to the funeral home. I keep hearing a noise, and it's just me on the couch. So if you hear it sounds like a water drop, or I don't know. So when it was time to make the funeral arrangements, the process of that happens very, very fast. Faster than any of us were prepared for, faster than any of us had ever anticipated. You have to make all of these decisions in a moment where your mind is not thinking clear. You're not in the right frame of mind. My sister couldn't even do it. So that left me and my mom and my cousin Lise. So the three of us went to the funeral home in Arnprior to make the arrangements. At the same time, we were trying to keep the house sealed so that it didn't get broken into and robbed, or it was just so frigging insane. And the funeral director has to be the most terrible human being ever that we could have had in that process. It was like, he was so disgusting, the things that he said to us. He himself, it was a tragic death. Young death. My niece was only 25. And it was an overdose. And she had left behind a young daughter who was only 3 years old. But in that, it's tragic. But in that, it's not uncommon for any of those things to happen. It's not uncommon for a young person to pass away. It's not uncommon for a young person to pass away from an overdose. And it's not uncommon for a young person to pass away and leave a small child behind. None of those things in this day and age, at that time, in this age of addiction and overdose and mental illness and things like that, it's not uncommon. So the way that we were treated is despicable. Despicable. The first time we met the funeral director, my mother was so distraught. She had just lost her granddaughter. And I don't come from a family that has money, by no means. We're actually probably a poor family. I don't want to speak for my other sister. I'm not speaking on her behalf at all. I have not even mentioned her name or her family or nothing of the sort. But we don't come from a family of luxuries. So for us to have to suddenly plan a funeral, that's overwhelming all on its own, you know? Like, a funeral is not cheap, let alone then you need flowers. You need to make your death notice. You got to notify the paper. There's such a process that goes along with that. And our funeral director, we wanted to have a cremation. And didn't want to have a fire cremation, so we chose a water cremation. And the way that the funeral director had described the water cremation to us to be, he said, the body will come back and it'll look just like cocaine. It'll be white and powdery and sandy, and it was like the man was infatuated with cocaine, but at the same time was overwhelmed at the fact that the person had died from an overdose. It was like I was living in a parallel state. Like, we finally got through all of that. And I remember at the time I didn't have a YouTube channel at the time, but I was making posts about it on probably my Instagram for sure. And my Facebook. I don't know if I had Instagram at that time. I think I had my I had my Instagram at that time. So I was making Instagram posts about it at the same time, but I didn't have a YouTube channel. And then when we had the wake, my sister was undecided if she wanted to have an open casket or a closed casket, because she just wasn't sure if she was mentally prepared to see her daughter lying dead in a coffin. Like, I really hate to say those things because it's difficult. She wasn't sure if she wanted that to be the last images that she had of her daughter. That's just not really the kind of images that you'd want to see, you know? And as people were coming through, it was literally a shit show because of the scene of people and her friends, and it's a young crew of people. We're a young family. We're a big family. We have friends in low spaces. We have friends in high spaces. And regardless of who you are, we don't judge you on your background, your lifestyle, not anything like that. You're coming to pay your last respects to somebody who's passed away. We don't judge you. But there were police that were watching to see who showed up, to see if anybody suspicious had showed up. And the funeral director pulled us aside and bullied us about how he had worked for 8 hours on the body and how good of a job he had done on the body, and that it would be unfortunate for us if we didn't have an open casket. Like, it was literally disgusting the way he was talking to us. So eventually, with some coaxing, my sister decided to let the person who found her, or who was with her in her last moments, see the body. And let the family just the family, have a last viewing. So we did that. And then we had like a mass afterwards. And the pastor that we had and the funeral director that we had were not on speaking terms at the time, because apparently the funeral director had fallen so far that he just wasn't technically being a man of God at the time. He had fallen from where he was, and he was being spiteful and throwing in digs about how his funeral chapel can pull in a full house, whereas the church chapel cannot pull in a full house. You know, those kinds of things are not welcome at the service of your loved one. But there they were anyways, in full view. Eventually we got through that. We got her buried. Well, no, we did the service. We did the service. We didn't have her. We didn't bury her right away, because the funeral home wouldn't give us the remains, like the urn and stuff, until we had paid for the funeral in full. Even though he had like probably 6,000 of the 10,000 that he charged us for. And let me tell you, it was in our worst moments that this man had us. We did know nothing about planning a funeral, any of the things. So he kind of probably put on more than he possibly should have for us, charged us more. And in the beginning, when my niece first died, somebody who isn't even related to the family set up a GoFundMe account, and the family contested it. So the GoFundMe was shut down, and there was never a GoFundMe that was able to be created again for that specific fundraiser. So my niece was out fundraiser for her funeral and anything else that would have been accumulated for her daughter. And whenever the funeral director wouldn't give us the remains, we posted that on Facebook, I think it was, probably my Instagram account. So people in the area started going to the funeral director's location and just like throwing him money, $20 bills, $5 bills, $100 bills, just to try to get the urn, like get these remains back so that we could bury them and put her to rest. Like, nobody deserves to be treated like that, ever. And I feel so much better telling that story. Eventually, we did get it paid. I think it was like, she died on the 10th of October, and we weren't able to bury her until the 29th of October. So it took that amount of time for us to build up the remainder of the funds to be able to have the remains released to us. We did get it done, but it's like, we have two separate dates now. We have like a funeral date and a burial date, two different, like 3 weeks apart. And she was actually put to rest on my daughter's birthday, on her birthday. Yeah. We're all just so connected in so many ways. My grandmother's buried in her casket, and you're allowed to have 4 other urns in the same space. So my cousin Jamie, that died a month and a half before that, his remains are in there, and my niece's remains are in there as well. And I had other members of my family, the outside parts, like my mom's sisters and stuff, get mad thinking that there wouldn't be room for them in there with their mother. Like, how selfish and petty. I feel like we're living in an upside down world. I swear to God. People are just so petty, and just, it blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind. People just. So anyways, yeah, that is my story on Pimo Funeral Home. I would never recommend them to anybody or anything like that. I'm not sure if the same man is still working there, but it was his, like, he was an owner, and his wife was the grief counselor. Like, no thanks, you guys put more grief on us than anything else. Thank you very much. We don't need your grief counseling. You can go to hell. So I know that there are other people that have had funeral horror stories as well. Like, not even getting, not only that, the place where we had the cremation done, the water cremation done, got closed down because apparently they were burning animals and people together. Can you imagine that? Like, can you imagine getting your loved one's remains back and it's not theirs, it's like somebody else's pet? I would sue. Like, I would sue them. That is just beyond. That's just unreal. For real. Anyways, that's the end of my story. I'll let you guys go. If you have a funeral story down there, let me know. My niece I think about her every day. I had to almost stop thinking about her because I was losing my own children in the process of grieving my daughter's child. I know that's not a nice thing to say, but I was losing myself. I was. And I don't think that Crystal would want me to live like that. I don't think she'd want any of us to live in perpetual grief. Smile. Find things that bring you passion and remind yourself of her beauty inside that. That's what I tell myself every day. It still hurts, though. It does. Like, it breaks my heart. Because I feel like it's my fault. I do. I feel like it's my fault. Okay. Love you, mean it, bye.